I'm Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and it's wonderful to have Mayor Wu return for another sold-out government affairs forum. Incidentally, it was sold out 2 weeks before the primary, so it's not a crowd based on the results of that overwhelming election, but it's nice to have about 650 business leaders from Boston gathered to hear from the mayor. On behalf of the business community, I'd like you to join me in recognizing and thanking a few elected and appointed officials that have joined us today. First, too many to mention, but I'm going to ask the mayor's cabinet, please stand up and be recognized and thanked for your service to the city of Boston. Now, I do get the privilege of calling out a few of those names. As a recovering chief of staff, I do have to recognize my friend Tiffany Chu, chief of staff to Mayor Wu. Tiffany, where are you? And two leaders in the city of Boston that work closely with the chamber every day. Boston Police Commissioner Michael Cox has joined us. Michael, thank you for your work. And my friend and neighbor, Boston School Superintendent Mary Skipper. Mary. And please welcome the City Council President, Ruthie Louis-Jean. Ruthie. As well as City Councilors Zapata, Fitzgerald, and Santana. Please welcome members of the Boston City Council. And I also want to give a shout out to District Attorney Kevin Hayden. Kevin, I know he's here somewhere. And other state and city elected and appointed officials. I know there's others here, but you don't want to hear from me. I know you want to hear from the mayor, so we'll move along. But I do want to give a special thank you to the city's senior advisor for community safety, Isaac Yablo, who met with about 25 members of our young professionals group, City Awake, prior to this meeting and had a nice conversation. Isaac, thank you for doing that. Where are you? So at the Chamber, we continue to serve as the leading convener and voice of the region's business community, fulfilling our purpose of making this the best place for all businesses and all people to succeed. We do this through issue advocacy that respects differences of opinion. We do this through collaboration, and we do this by bringing people together and developing important and timely programs. I want to share a few of those upcoming programs and events that feature influential business and government leaders. On Wednesday, September 24th, the Chamber will host another Transportation First event, the State of Our Highways and Bridges in Massachusetts, featuring Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver in partnership with my friend from the Springfield Regional Chamber, Diana Cisno. October 7th, we'll have a Women's Network featuring Congresswoman Catherine Clark, who is also a Chamber Pinnacle Award winner. And on October 14th, we'll feature Federal Reserve Bank of Boston President Susan Collins for a special event, Perspectives on the Economy. You can register for all of these events and see others at bostonchamber.com. We're almost ready to welcome the mayor, but I do want to thank a few of our partners that help us produce these events each year. Thank you to our friends at Comcast who bring our government affairs programs to a wider audience. And finally, I want to thank our long-standing sponsor of 20 years, Bank of America. Bank of America continues to lead in supporting this important event series and is such a critical part of our community here in Boston. Now I'm pleased to turn it over to Mihal Chamberlain, President, Bank of America, and Chamber Executive Committee.
All right. Thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see a full room, a lot of friends and colleagues. Before I start, I just want to thank my Bank of America teammates and the partnership we've had here with the Chamber in bringing the Government Affairs Forum. Always great to hear from government leaders. I know how busy you are, Mayor, and thank you for joining us. I'd also like to thank Jim and the Chamber team for, as he mentioned, the work they do on behalf of the entire business community. I know everybody in this room appreciates what you do for the businesses here. And really how you work across public and private lines here to ensure that all businesses can thrive in Boston. So thank you, Jim, and the Chamber team. So it's now my pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker, Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Mayor Wu is a Boston Public Schools mom, a daughter of immigrants, and an MBTA commuter. In 2021, Mayor Wu became the first woman, the first mom, and the first person of color to be elected as the mayor of our city. Mayor Wu started in public service with an internship at City Hall under then-Mayor Tom Menino while she was studying at Harvard Law School. She's an alumna of the Rappaport Fellows Program and the recipient of the Massachusetts Democratic Party's Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt Award. Also, Mayor Wu was named one of the Boston Globe's Bostonians of the Year and as one of the Chamber's 10 outstanding young leaders. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our Mayor, Michelle Wu, to the stage. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Good morning. Okay, God. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Good morning, good morning. Okay, we're eating into our Q&A time with Jim, my favorite time all year. Good morning. And yes, that last line of the bio is what sparked everything. So thank you to the Chamber for the 10 Outstanding Young Leaders Award. What year was that, Jim? 2016, 17, yeah. So I appreciate so much the work that this group has done over so many years for our city. And it is a treat and an honor to see you all here bright and early and to get to catch up in the hallway and have some Q&A here and hopefully afterwards to hear a little bit more about what you all have been up to and what your dreams are for the next 4 years. So good morning, and thank you to Jim, to Corey, to all of the members, the board members, and everyone at the Chamber for convening us here today. Thank you to my colleagues in elected office, Madam President Lujan and all the counselors, any of our state officials, DA Hayden, and all of our partners who work every day in very challenging times to serve our community. I'm so grateful and blessed to work alongside you all. And congrats to our city councilors also for your strong showing as you're gearing up for November. Thank you to my incredible colleagues at City Hall. You all give everything to the city, and the progress that we're marking, the determination and the ambition that we have for the city in the years ahead is because of your work. So on everything from housing to our libraries and workforce and schools and safety and making sure that everybody is part of our community, we would not be here without you. So please, one more round of applause for everyone who serves the city of Boston. And thank you so much, Michal, for your kind introduction and most of all for your partnership and your leadership all year round. Bank of America has been absolutely amazing in creating and capitalizing on the opportunities in our city when you put us on the global scale every Marathon Monday and throughout each one of our neighborhoods where I know we have partnered on things that haven't hit the headlines and you are always there day in and day out. And congratulations on the recent news that Bank of America will be the financing partner for Boston Legacy FC as they join So our professional women's soccer team will join with the City of Boston, and after decades of broken promises and failed plans, finally redevelop White Stadium to give our Boston Public School students what they deserve, which is the very best. Speaking of our young people, I have two very happy BPS students in my household with the news that both LEGO and now Hasbro will be relocating and building their headquarters in Boston by the end of 2026. So not only will this bring 1,500 jobs to our city, it means that now, when the kids are begging for that Millennium Falcon LEGO set at Target, they're gonna go straight to, "But Mom, don't you wanna support the local economy?" They already learned, I read that to them to see if they approved, and they said, "We're gonna remember that." So I think it's fair to say that these recent moves make Boston the toy capital of the world. And in all seriousness, these aren't small moves. These are global companies with lots of options. And they join other global powerhouses who are choosing Boston as the hub of talent and opportunity. Last week I spoke with Joe Bay to celebrate KKR's expansion in Boston, leasing more than 130,000 square feet of office space in the financial district. And then I joined Nubar Afayan on stage at Leader Bank Pavilion to greet 3,000 scientists and innovators gathered together for flagship pioneering celebration of 25 years, launching 100 companies in the life sciences in the greater Boston area. Hasbro, LEGO, Foundation Medicine, Eli Lilly, Bain, Ropes & Gray, PwC, Vertex, and companies of every scale are choosing to build or expand on their footprint here. And in every conversation I have with these CEOs and their teams, I hear the same theme. They're choosing Boston because of our people. So today I want to focus my remarks on what competitiveness actually means. Not clinging on to corporate tax cuts on the backs of Boston's homeowners and seniors, not trying to undo the millionaire's tax and other revenue sources to strain state and municipal budgets even further. Competitiveness in this economy and in this moment means working together to nurture, recruit, and promote top talent, building up the community and workforce that any company would want to consider relocating to join. So when I say I'm fighting to make Boston a home for everyone, I'm talking about making Boston the human capital of the world, the talent capital of the world. When I highlight that Boston is the safest major city in America, I'm emphasizing our determination to uphold the highest standards for safety and belonging so talent can thrive and businesses can grow. When I push to expand fare-free bus service, it's to make the ultimate capitalist investment in removing friction from our economy by getting talent where they need to go, to our world-class universities, to work, to restaurants and shops. When we work to expand our free museum program called Boston Family Days, it's to help everyone in our workforce give their children the world, and for our children, the next generation of talent, to cultivate their spark of creativity, wonder, and discovery. When we push to narrow health disparities in Boston and build pipelines from our schools into health careers, it's because a healthy workforce is a strong and sustainable one. When I say Boston won't back down from being a beacon of freedom, I'm talking about standing strong to protect and recruit scientists and engineers and researchers, immigrant innovators and essential workers, and every American seeking a welcoming community where we are free to live our lives in full bloom and give our all to the next big idea that can change the world. And when I say, this is our city, a little bit differently from Big Papi, but close enough. When I say this is our city, I mean for nearly 400 years, Boston has refused to bow down or sit back in times of challenge. And we are determined, no matter who comes at us, to make this the best place to raise a family, whether you were born here, came here to study, or came here to find safety and opportunity. City of champions, city on a hill, hub of the universe's top talent. You can't beat Boston. Up against federal threats, rising tides, and chaotic markets, Boston is and will be the best place to build a business because we are making Boston the best place for families of every culture and every generation. 2 weeks ago, those families, that talent pool, had something to say at the ballot box. Every election is a referendum, and September 9th showed that the people of Boston reward results. Over the past 4 years, our administration, working alongside our city, state, and federal partners, and supported by partnerships with every sector, including so many in this room, implemented a whole-of-government approach to make Boston the best city for families. And we got results. We are the safest major city in America, driving violence and crime down to 70-year lows. There are now more than 1,000 new first-time homeowners in Boston, more than ever before, through the city's programs. 1,400 families have been stabilized in their homes through our Acquisition Opportunity Program, taking properties off the speculative market and making them permanently affordable. And thank you to our partners in this room for funding this work: Mass General Brigham, Boston Children's, Beth Israel, Dana-Farber, Boston Medical, Tufts Medicine, Eastern Bank, the Boston Foundation, and Barr Foundation, for your partnership and for recognizing that your workforce, from PAs, CNAs, and nurses to doctors, custodians, and office staff, should be able to afford to live in the city that they serve. $35 million in grants were given to more than 1,500 small businesses, more than 70% of them owned by people of color. 5,000 free pre-K seats for our youngest learners, the greatest expansion that the city has ever made. 10,000 students working paid youth summer jobs, the most that we've ever had. 12,000 units of housing delivered since taking office, with tens of thousands more approved and on the way. 65,000 free museum visits for Boston students and their families, with a new performing arts lineup free to our students to be announced later this week. Nearly 20 million trips on our fare-free bus routes that connected every part of our economy and community. Because at the end of the day, when we invest in our kids and our families, when we invest in the future of our city, we invest in the future of your businesses too. But I want to be clear. We can't build the best city to raise a family by slashing corporate taxes and either making it more expensive for residents to live here or cutting funding for our teachers, parks, and transportation. That's bad for business and bad for Boston. It's because Boston is the best place to raise a family that we have an amazing talent pool. It's because Boston is the best place to raise a family that businesses are moving here and voting with their feet. The numbers tell the story. In the second quarter of 2025, businesses signed deals to lease 1.8 million square feet of office space, a 94% jump from last year. We've cut our office vacancy rate nearly in half compared to 2.5 years ago. And during that period, thanks to the hard work of the Downtown Business Alliance, Boston has added more than 50 small retail businesses downtown, with several exciting restaurants set to open soon. Boston has 500 more business establishments than we did last year. And major brands are putting down roots for the long haul. Apple and Ralph Lauren bought their Back Bay stores outright. J. Crew just opened a large flagship store, pushing Newbury Street's record low vacancy rate even lower. And at the same time, our innovation economy is thriving. Klaviyo signed a significant office expansion earlier this year. Boston is fast becoming a hub from quantum and AI, with NVIDIA and Q-Blocks expanding, and Dynatrace opening its global headquarters on Atlantic Wharf. We're also leading on climate innovation. ClimeAction expanded from Ireland to Boston in March, investing $27 million to push forward digital agriculture and decarbonization and build the industries of the future right here in Boston. And we're putting resources into our downtown as well. Downtown, we're leading the nation in turning offices into homes. Less than 2 years after launching our office to residential conversion program, we already have nearly 1,000 units of new housing in the pipeline. That's space for thousands of new residents, families, workers, and students who will bring new life to our city core. And soon, thanks to the hard work from Chief of Planning Kairos Shen and his team, new downtown zoning to protect the historic core and create predictability for new residential development will unlock even more possibility downtown. From retail to startups to biotech to the next wave of science and technology, your companies are betting on Boston. It's the right bet. Amid an uncertain national economy, Boston's payroll employment is now 2.2% higher than pre-pandemic, and more Bostonians than ever before are working jobs thanks to the partners in this room. Boston's answer to overreach and interference has never been retreat. It's been resolve. We've never asked permission to do it our way and to take care of our communities how we know best, and we won't now. Back in May, after months of targeted attacks by the federal government on many of our anchor industries, the nation's two leading credit rating agencies took a long, hard look at our finances at the City of Boston and our economy. They both awarded the City of Boston a AAA bond rating for the 12th consecutive year in a row. They called our fiscal management sound. They called our fiscal management sound, our economy resilient. And now we're using that rating to issue nearly $500 million in bonds to fund almost 400 projects, from new libraries to community centers to infrastructure upgrades. Boston will never back down from pouring into our people, because we understand what makes us great is who we've got. Our future will be defined by how strongly we stand together to defend one another, how we stand together to defend our world-class universities, who provide $72 million in scholarships to Boston students every year, employ more than 50,000 people, and generate tens of billions in economic impact for our city. How we stand together to defend our hospitals and research institutions from illegal funding cuts as they work to develop vaccines that save lives and change livelihoods. And how we stand together to protect our community members whose very lives are on the line. Standing together is more than just one of our values. It's the foundation of the economic strategy that will win the day, standing on the right side of history to chart our brightest future. These next few years will not be easy. The federal assault on Boston is far from finished. But to me, public service has never been about sitting around and waiting for things to happen. Local government is uniquely positioned to do things, to take chances, to be proactive, to invest in people and infrastructure and in our shared future. And what gives me hope is that this work isn't confined to City Hall. It's happening right here, when businesses hire our students for summer jobs, in our adult education classes, on our business recruitment task force, at block parties, and in boardrooms. And it's going to happen even more so next year, as our city comes together for an incredible opportunity to welcome the world for our 250th Independence Day, Tall Ships, and the World Cup. Our city government can't make progress acting alone. We rely on your partnership and your counsel to build a better future together. If we want an economy that works for everyone, we have to build it with everyone. And if we build it with everyone, if we stand together, you can't beat Boston. So thank you for your collaboration. This is our city, and I look forward to continuing to build it up with all of you.
Okay, 2 standing ovations already, and we haven't even gotten started. I know you were kind to say that your favorite part of this is the Q&A with Jim, but I think you were just being nice. First, thank you for such a passionate speech about the city of Boston. I think I personally, and I think everyone in this room, shares your city, your passion and your belief in this city.
You shared
So,
every agreement with
thank
every part of the speech, right, Jim?
Just about. Just about. So, you kicked it off, and let's go there, because everyone expects us to. You kicked it off talking about competitiveness and all of the good reasons, and I want to just peel that back a little bit. Expand on your point about taxes. There's always a balance to be achieved in taxation, whether it's personal income tax, business tax. There's always a balance. And, in the world of competitiveness, people who decide to bring their businesses here or decide to locate here, it's a factor they look at. You know that. Yeah. You and I talk about this quite regularly. Talk about achieving that balance, and when you feel like, it's in the right place, and when you feel like, maybe we need to pump the brakes on some things.
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's always important to start with a grounding in what the national data actually say. And there are many very trusted sources. I turn to the Lincoln Land Institute's look at property taxes across all 50 states to understand where we stack up. And in that lineup, it is true that, for example, and that there are multiple angles into how you understand the impact of what numbers actually say in real life. So, for example, that report says that Boston has almost the lowest residential property tax rate in the country, but because our assessed values are so high here compared to other cities, we end up having one of the higher total residential property tax bills. The burden that residents are paying is among the highest in the nation. At the same time, our corporate tax rate, one other stat in there, the shift that happens in terms of the classification between what share of property taxes is borne by residents versus businesses, the share that is swung over to businesses is among the highest in the nation, but then that translates into a corporate tax rate that is right below middle of the pack across the country. Now, that's just to set the stage, because I think sometimes, we hear numbers taken in different ways locally without that larger context. At the same time, I think everyone in this room knows that Boston is never going to be the place that people come because it's the cheapest to do business, right? We're a very densely and landlocked and sort of very developed community already, where it's all about urban redevelopment, and it's very expensive, high land costs, high labor costs, and all of that is to support a quality of life that is tops in the nation as well. And that makes a difference, right? With the Fair Share Amendment, with the extra resources that have been poured into public transportation, for example, Travel and Leisure magazine just rated the MBTA as the top public transit agency, the public transit system in the country, right? What a difference in 3 years.
All right, come on.
So it matters. And I will be the first to say that I know incentives make a difference, right? The reason why our Office to Residential Conversion program has happened and has been so successful, right? It's a small piece of the puzzle, but an important one, is because we're giving 75% off property taxes for 29 years, and that is the gap between making empty office building possible for conversion into residential. So how do I think about all the pieces of it? Obviously everything is a thorough conversation, and just because something is decided once, whether that is bike lanes or a new policy, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be constantly revisiting it to make sure that the context still holds. At the same time, I think my challenge to the larger business community is all of us need to be thinking about competitiveness, but let's come to a broader consensus on what competitiveness means when we actually go and push and use our political capital, including the business community's very, very important political capital, on what issues you're taking on, whether it's at the state legislature and statewide policy or at the city. And we need your help thinking about how we can actually fund school renovations in a way that is sustainable and makes sense, right? The MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority, has the purview to fund every single school district across the Commonwealth with a limited budget. Meanwhile, Boston has over 100 school buildings that if we see the difference when students are learning in a brand new building with updated science labs, with the ability to participate in the technology that allows them to Zoom or even just have basic temperature control so students can learn properly. So there's so much good that we do to stretch every dollar. And having it as just a sort of zero-sum view of, well, we need to make sure that we're reducing this side of the ledger when that actually then swings things over to another side or cuts the total amount available to maintain the best city services in the country. Potholes that are filled in a 24-hour turnaround, safe and clean streets, lowest rates for crime and violence in the city's history and nationally. That all takes resources. And the last note I'll make here on behalf of my other mayors and municipal leaders is that Prop 2.5 is a very significant sort of constraint across every city's planning. The fact that our primary source of revenues can only go up 2.5% every year, when that is far lower than inflation. Even on average, of the 43 years that law's been in place, inflation has been on average 25% higher every year, above 2.5% growth. And even just recently, where we saw inflation, I think the latest number I saw was 2.9%. Meanwhile, healthcare costs are going up in the 12 to 20% range for our amazing city workers. Other costs are going up, and so we're always scrambling. In Boston, that comes out as needing to get above 2.5% growth by trying to find new growth or other sources, leaning on our commercial sector. Many cities across the Commonwealth don't have a gigantic commercial sector or even what you would call a downtown, and that means that they are having to make up the difference between the 2.5% cap and their actual cost through Prop 2.5 ballot overrides. Usually ballot overrides in those communities happen once every, I don't know, stretched out period of time, 5 years, whatever it is. But now they are having to go and ask their residents for these ballot overrides on a much more frequent basis, which then just undermines the kind of planning and trust between government and our constituents anyway. So we need to have a real conversation about what it means to fund public services that everyone relies on and do so in a way that works for the business community, is thoughtful, diversifies our revenue sources, and is sustainable in the long run.
Mm-hmm. You and I could nerd out on tax policy all day long, but I'm sure people don't want to hear us do that. In what I think of as the post-Central Artery era, there were 20 years of development growth that in the city of Boston that in some ways masked this tension between commercial and residential. Now we're in the post-pandemic era. I've said publicly 5 to 10 years to find a new water level in terms of what does that mean. Is there, or can we find a way to stimulate the development activities to relieve some of that tension?
Absolutely, and we're doing everything that we can in terms of what a municipal government with municipally constrained resources can. I think one note on the top of what I want to, just a side note on this before I dive into a little bit more detail, is that even here though, the way that our state tax law works in Massachusetts provides kind of counterintuitive incentives. We all know that the housing costs have been out of control and need to be brought down for your workforce, for recruitment, for retention. Well over a decade, this has been sort of the top issue stressing our residents and causing people to leave Boston or Massachusetts, and we need to get housing costs under control. We need to build and make sure we're boosting supply and housing production, and I'll get into more of that. However, just the fact that the way that our tax revenues are so constrained, the decision, for example, to take commercial properties offline and turn them into residential, or to focus on building residential instead of commercial, that is a tax hit for local municipalities because of how the rate translates and all that. So we are trying to do the right thing, and we are doing the right thing, but that in fact, there's on the back end, there's a little bit of a tax penalty for us in making the right planning choices for our overall community rather than sort of maximizing in this the sort of Prop 2.5 context. So anyway, what are we doing to incentivize new growth and development? I think One is, no matter what point of the economic cycle we are in, the best thing that I believe public sector and city governments in particular can do is to try to get out of the way as much as possible. We are working to streamline permitting, zoning, and taking on a lot of that very intense in the neighborhood meetings work all throughout the city. So we've launched citywide rezoning for the first time since 1965. We are overhauling Article 80 for the first time since that code was written that governs development approvals for large-scale developments. We have worked to, we're I think down, Sheila would correct me, but we set a goal of cutting the time that it takes for affordable housing developments to be approved, cut that in half. We are at 30-some% down now. We'll be at 40% by the end of the year, and we're making great progress. That then allows us to streamline other market rate projects as well. And we're undergoing an entire permitting overhaul at the city. So anytime you need a permit or license to open a business or put a new deck on your house or host a special event, construction permits of all kinds, it should be simple, easy, online, and you give your information once. You don't have to give it to every other agency that you're interacting with. You don't have to go in person to 1010 or any of the locations where people have to have a full-time job seeking permits. And we will see, I think, the fruits of that over the next year or so as we invested a lot in the part of the 7% budget increase that we had last cycle before the 4% increase this last cycle was major technology investments in changing out our software that allows us to finally accept more of that online and to catch up a little bit with what we need so that we can make it as easy and convenient as possible for everyone to smooth their processes. We're also providing subsidies in the right places and looking at the case-by-case examples where you can get over the line to financing in detailed conversations with developers and other project proponents.
Okay. We saw today, and we've certainly seen over the past year, you're an incredible spokesperson for the city of Boston. You project a positive energy. You defined competitiveness in a meaningful way this morning. I've said publicly that I think the Commonwealth in Boston does not tell its story well, is not effective in being out there to compete with a tremendous story to tell. Share your thoughts on competing. You know, competitiveness and all of the good things we have is one thing, but actually going out there and trying to attract business and talent and going out there to tell the story while other cities are out there trying to define Boston and tell people about things that might be in the negative column.
Sorry. So I think there's two parts of impactfully telling our story. One is having the right content and messaging, right? What exactly is the value proposition that we are putting together? What are we willing to put on the table in terms of incentives, or what are the key selling points that we know are tailored to this particular industry or this particular company, and knowing what the most effective message will be. And then there's the coordination so that there are many, many messengers all saying the same thing. And I think on both those fronts, we have done some work and have a lot more work to do. I want to thank you, Jim, and there are a couple other folks in this room who agreed to put a significant amount of time into our business recruitment task force, our advisory group, meeting with us about how we start to get more organized across the city and the state and the private sector and all areas. You all, our CEOs, are the best validators for why the city of Boston is the best place to work, to live, to visit, to raise your family. And so we, I think, are making some important steps to having a coordinated effort on that front. We have repurposed some of the roles in City Hall or the sort of affiliated infrastructure to be able to provide a dedicated focus on this. And we need to continue honing in on what are the key industries that we're going after. I think there's, in this world of lots of unpredictability at the federal level and changing economic tides. I don't think we can anchor too much on one particular moment because it changes by the next week and the next day. We have to think about Boston's long-term strategy and what our core strengths are. And we heard repeatedly from you and from others that we have to double down on what we're already doing best and what we already do well. And so if we talk about tech and innovation, let's talk about that as it relates to our healthcare industry and the eds and meds and finance that we're already known for. As we try to go after certain companies, let's lean into the unique advantages that we have. And so that is a larger conversation that includes everything from direct flights to certain cities to a direct pitch. Boston should be on the list. Boston should be at the top of the list of any global company that wants to establish a presence in the United States, or any West Coast company that is looking to grow their market over here. I truly, again, I'll keep hitting on this, I believe that our value proposition is that we have the top talent anywhere, and that this is the place where talent wants to live and to live their fullest lives. And so I think if we, between the safety, the city services, the fun, the opportunities here, the education, we have it all, but we have to do a better job of all speaking from the same script.
You and I have talked about downtown vitality, and by that we mean people, of course, and people falls into three buckets: people that live, people that visit, and people that work. I want to focus on the work part. There's many businesses that have required people to come back to work 3 or 4 days, and they've started to say, "I mean it this time," as opposed to previous years when they had them but didn't really do much about it. Your thoughts on that in the flexible work environment, and I don't know, what is the policy at City Hall for that?
Yeah, so at the very beginning of the pandemic, City Hall shut down for 2 weeks. Do I have that right, Pat? 3 weeks, somewhere in that time frame. And that was it. We were back to giving, it was then by appointment, and there were protections in place, but there was a very, very, very short period of time that everything was actually shut down. And that is because we understand how critical city services are. And that's everything from our first responders, who never were able to shut down, to providing vital documents and the actions that make businesses able to run and everyone able to live their lives. Today, the policy still is that 90% of the jobs at City Hall cannot be anything other than in person. Right? There's no way to fill that pothole over Zoom and teach our students that way. And so by and large, the vast, vast majority of our city jobs are 100% in person. We have 10% of our jobs that are eligible for some component of remote work if the sort of supervisory structure deems that it is possible to make that happen, and if it is the kind of work that can be done just as effectively with a 1 to 2 days of remote work. We have implemented this policy, I think feeling the same pressures that you all have, that many of our roles where people are paid triple or more in the private sector, we were losing folks, and the remote part was a key component of that. I think as the larger world starts to settle, and as everyone is starting to recognize the benefits of in-person collaboration and what that means, we are going to continue to provide both the support for the push in person, but also provide ways to help pull, right? Events and activations and anything that we can do to continue to bring people together to show that from the first ever Boston Public Art Triennial to unique events that are happening on City Hall Plaza to other ways that we're making public transportation more reliable and convenient and removing those barriers. This is the city where if you are here to invest in that big idea that's going to change the world, the best kind of creativity, collaboration does happen when you're in the spark of being in person and in the same room. And so we want to create these rooms where you can't miss out on and you need to be there to fulfill your own life goals and career goals and to contribute to your organizations.
So let's shift to visitors. First half of the year was tough for the hotel industry, hospitality, retail, for a lot of different reasons. International visitors, for example, way down in the first half of the year. Next year, you alluded to what's going on with the 250th anniversary, the World Cup, the tall ships. Talk about that opportunity and the importance of visitors to the Boston economy.
This is the first thing out of so many of the small businesses' mouths and retailers, whether walking around Chinatown or the downtown area. It is deeply felt that foot traffic is significantly down. The number of international students is down, the number of tourists is down, and I used to be someone who very focused on my constituents and my community. If I met someone who was from Canada previously, I would say, oh, okay, you're not from Boston, great, welcome. But now, if they're from Canada and I meet them, I have effusive praise and thanks for coming to support our economy and visit and make sure that they're investing here. I think there's a key role for Boston here. I've gotten a lot of questions about what the right strategy is to speak, when to speak out and when not to speak out, when policies don't make sense, whether that is about immigration or more sort of direct economic, immigration is economic as well, about tariffs or anything else. And I think one, for our own communities, it's important to know where their city government stands on issues and who, what the laws will be and how we will follow those laws. But two, at a time when there is so much frustration and anger internationally with what is perceived as a disrespectful, hostile, or even worse federal administration when it comes to international policy, it's important and helpful for Boston to be clear about who we are and the places where we don't go along with that approach. And so we've done a lot of direct conversations as well. I get to spend some time every holiday season with the premier from Nova Scotia who comes down for, along with the big tree that Nova Scotia and Halifax continue to send to Boston as a gesture of friendship after Boston, more than 100 years ago, provided a relief train after the Halifax explosion that devastated their community. And so we've had conversations about how to build that up even more this year and to continue demonstrating. I know the governor and many folks in this room were in the same room hosting the Canadian premiers and governors as well. The places where we can continue to build those direct personal relationships matters a lot. And every time I'm in a space with mayors from around the world or mayors from around the country, we see and recognize the importance of solidarity in this moment. When NIH cuts were proposed or tried to be rammed through, it was the city of Boston who organized 40-plus cities in red states, in blue states, with red mayors, or Republican mayors, or Democratic mayors, all together to protect the jobs and the research and the critical impacts from NIH funding in our communities through an amicus brief in the court case. We're going to continue to do that and build those relationships because at this local level, what I love best about city government is that you can't get caught up in just partisan talk or big picture words. It's about getting things done, whatever lines that cuts across. And I know my colleagues at the city level all around the world feel the same way.
I know it's a bit early to think about the budget for next year, but talking about federal changes in legislation and funding and so forth, the One Big Beautiful Bill is passed that has implications for states and cities all over the country. Do you have an indication of what Boston stands to lose or how that might affect the approach to preparing next year's budget?
We did the full count headed into this current budget cycle previously, and again, shout out to all of my council colleagues for working so diligently with us to make sure we were striking the right balance of providing enough of a cushion and slimming down everywhere possible that we could without cutting to the bone in terms of city services that are very much or even more needed in this moment. So there's about $300 million of annual federal funding that the city relies on, primarily going to public education, public safety, and housing. There are also now competitive grants that we have been awarded under the Biden administration that are in various stages of either cancellation or being threatened to be canceled. Some of this they may have the right to do, some of this they legally cannot do at the federal level. And so unfortunately, we have also been very busy in court. Thank you to our Attorney General and her office. Attorney General Campbell has convened weekly meetings with local communities just to make sure we're on the same page about which grants are now on the chopping block or which ones we should or shouldn't apply for, or have to be careful about this language that's now been inserted or that. And so it's taking significant resources, but we're monitoring that very closely. There are some significant wins. We have one in court, for example, protecting and holding on to our continuum of care funding to address homelessness, $48 or so million that we were able to continue using because of a court decision. And then there are other infrastructure grants for small projects that we were going to do in various neighborhoods that are now looking like we will not be able to get them back, potentially. We will continue to fight for every dollar that is owed to the city, but we have to plan for tremendous ongoing uncertainty. And what that means, looking at our city budget, again, there were lots of projections as we talked about the tax shift and what would come to pass and what wouldn't, and how at this point we would be more than 20% into a $1.5 billion revenue shortfall if we passed the budget that we ended up passing. I mean, none of that has come to pass, and it's been a little frustrating that with the very serious and real factual stresses and risks that the city has to deal with, so much of the reporting was kind of parroting things that were straight up false about municipal finance and how tax law works. At this point, unfortunately, the silver lining of being such a property tax reliant community and structure in city government in Massachusetts is that we're not that shaken by federal grants and sales tax or other more economically sensitive, immediately economically sensitive revenue sources than we otherwise would be. Of course, that's putting a lot of strain on our property owners and signal again we need to diversify our revenues. But by and large, the quote-unquote big beautiful bill did not have as many immediate city level impacts. It certainly, when people lose out on health care coverage, that trickles immediately into the types of city services that they will need, but it wasn't a direct cut to city budgets. We rely on property taxes, we rely on state funding that comes to all cities, and we rely on bits here and there between motor vehicle excise tax and hotel and tourism taxes, et cetera. We are going to continue keeping that belt cinched as tight as it possibly can. Prop 2.5 is the tightest belt of all, but we came in at 4% growth in this current year's budget cycle, which was slashing 500 jobs that were long-time vacant jobs or salary savings from delaying certain, our police class, for example, our new academy started a little bit later than it otherwise would have, and it's those kinds of movements where we're trying to protect all of our headcount in terms of city workers that are delivering services because they are much, much needed, and making sure we're not adding new programs or new roles for whatever might come in the future.
Okay, we're just about at time, but I have to squeeze in a public safety question. So I get to meet with chamber presidents all over the country, and we talk about what's on the top of the list. And people go around the room, and they're always talking about public safety issues in their communities. All of the things we talked about and all of the things that make Boston competitive is built on something that you say often that sometimes people might attribute to being a political tagline, that Boston's the safest city in America. As they're talking, I don't feel the need to contribute to that conversation. And I think sometimes we don't recognize enough just the work of our public safety officials in getting us to this. So please join me in thanking people that do that. And sometimes it's the it's the serious crime, the murder, the assault, that sort of thing. But I can tell you that a couple years ago, I reached out to Commissioner Cox and District Attorney Kevin Hayden about, shoplifting, some lower level crimes, but nonetheless, things that affect the quality of life and perceptions of safety and feelings of safety. And the response was incredible from both of them. Talk about that a little bit. Talk about the efforts to maintain the status and to deal with those issues that are low-level crimes or antisocial behavior that just make people feel like maybe it's not as safe as we say it is. Yeah, quality of life.
Well, I guess I do still want to start with just a reminder of the facts nationally, which is that for the last full year that we have data, and every major police department reports the data up to, well, at least for the time being, they report to the federal government. Who knows now? Boston's homicide rate was by far the lowest in absolute numbers and per capita by residents, and certainly the lowest in our city's history. The certain members of our lovely accountable local press corps reminded me that if you cut it a certain way, Mesa, Arizona had a slightly lower rate than we did. I'm sorry, Mesa, but if you don't have all sports teams, you're not a real city, okay? Like that's the bar to be in the conversation. Anyway, so the numbers are real, and they're not an accident. It's not a coincidence. And the commissioner and his incredible leadership and the team that he's assembled, the reforms that he's put in place, the leadership that he demonstrates, partnered and coupled with Dr. Yablo and the incredible approach that we have to violence prevention and intervention. It is all about partnership. Yesterday, the commissioner and I were at 2 events together. Earlier in the day, we were at a block party, the first ever block party hosted and thanking our Boston Police Patrolmen's Association and their families. So they are pulled away from their families for every major event, but to celebrate and thank and recognize the hard work that our officers do every single day. And then a few hours later, we were together at the groundbreaking for the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute's new National Center for Teaching and Healing, an incredible organization. And I know Chaplain Clementina Sherry is sometimes in this room and has been here previously, but it is a nearly 30-year organization that has supported survivors of homicide. And between these 2 organizations, in many cities, you would have felt that they would be on opposite sides of each other, right? In many cities, the dynamic between how our officers are perceived or treated or how residents are willing to work together or not can feel very fraught. And we always have more work to do in Boston, and we're always going to hold ourselves accountable to the highest standards. But the fact that in this city for decades, we've been leading nationally on community policing based on trust, not on just arresting our way out of situations, but really having solid working relationships. Our officers are at neighborhood meetings every single month, presenting information and taking in information about what the strategy has to be. And Isaac convenes weekly meetings now, no matter whether we're in the immediate aftermath of a horrible tragedy or if it's been very quiet, right? This was, oftentimes cities will point to the summer as a time where you have to be sort of very vigilant and with everybody out and about, naturally there tend to be more concerning incidents. This last July, Boston recorded 0 homicides. And that is a testament to all of the partnership, the youth summer jobs, the block parties, the policing strategies that we have, the new recruits that have been added, the largest police classes ever in the city's history the last few years, and also the most diverse and representative of our community. All of that has enabled us to show such significant progress in driving down violence and major crimes that it has allowed for more focus and resources to go to quality of life issues. And my strategy for any issue that is longstanding, entrenched, and needs to be tackled, I think there are 3 elements to it. 1, you need focus accountability. You can get anything done in city government as long as there's at least one person thinking about it all the time, and it's not on the bottom of someone's list. 2 is relentless coordination. We are solving issues everywhere across the city, but in different silos, and so bringing everyone to the table. And then 3 is a person-by-person approach. So our approach to the opiate crisis has been along those lines. Our approach to driving down gun violence has been along those lines. And same thing with the Safe Shopping Initiative. Thank you to the DA and his team. Rather than just treating now each incident that comes in when a store calls that there's a low-level thing that happened and then it sort of gets dismissed, or because it didn't rise to the level of significant prosecution, that person is right back out there, but meanwhile they went to another store and that incident was logged separately in the same way. Now there's a lot of back-end work that happens with our retail partners and with the DA's office and BPD, where we're tracking to know who are actually the repeat offenders across various different locations, or tending to go after higher dollar amounts, or have some risk to public safety involved in their actions, and then packaging that together so that there's now a different set of consequences for those situations that merit that. That has been, we've heard from our business, from our companies and retail partners, that has been transformational in how the feel is, because you can easily see a cycle and a slide one direction or the other, right? If you have constant shoplifting and it's treated individually and nothing ever happens, then at a certain point, the businesses stop calling. They stop reporting it because why does it matter? And they take a risk when people know that they're reporting crimes, and then the numbers look low, and then you don't put more resources because the numbers look low. We want to try to achieve the opposite spiral and opposite cycle in every which way. And so now from shoplifting and safe shopping to package thefts to any kind of quality of, even making sure we are trying to end outdoor congregate drug use in the city of Boston, and the sort of quality of life and real public health and public safety impacts that come along with it, we are making more progress than anywhere else in the country. We hold ourselves to the highest standards, so we're by no means done. But the reason why I say constantly that we are the safest major city in the country is not to take a victory lap and say we're done. It's to recognize that when we put in hard work collectively, it makes a difference, and we should celebrate when there are steps forward. But it's also to remind ourselves of what our own standards are, that we will not settle for anything than being the best in this category, in every other category, but that we have a lot more work to do to truly make that real for every resident in every part of the city.
All right. So in the spirit of being the best, we look forward to working with you over the next 4 years. Please join me in thanking Mayor Michelle Wu.
Thank you so much.